Williams. I'm going to share just a little bit about our testimony, our story, try to get through it. Let's see, we met about in the 7th and 9th grade. We were high school sweethearts. We really hated each other at first. That gradually changed. We've been married now a little over 20 years, and we have 2 amazing little boys. We consider ourselves the older parents. Yeah. Our story hasn't always been rainbows and butterflies. We, like any other couple, have had our hard times and happy times. We knew about year 10 that we wanted to grow our family. We also knew because of my health issues that we didn't want to try and do that biologically. Really, biology never really mattered much to us anyhow. Adoption was always on our hearts and minds. In fact, it was everywhere we looked. My mom was adopted, my best friend was adopted, TV commercials, radio, even a concert that we went to. Adoption was first and foremost in the message. In 2013, we set out with the state for adoption. We did all the training, paperwork, etc. We were matched with an older sibling group, and they were brought to our home in December of 2013. It was an uphill battle from the start. We did everything we could to help that sibling group. Counseling, therapy, doctor's appointments, conferences, all of it. However, they needed more help than what we could give. Luke and I were faced with some hard decisions, and without any help from the state, we were forced to sign away our rights in 2016. Our marriage took a major hit during that time. We spent the next 2 years rebuilding us. That wasn't easy either. We wanted a family, but we couldn't seem to be on the same page. I would be hurt and scared, he would be all ready to go, or vice versa. It was a difficult 2 years, but God was faithful. We wanted to adopt again and knew we would do it through ABBA adoption, a private adoption this time, a baby. We still had concerns and we were scared to death. Finances were a big concern for us. Adoption cost money, and money we didn't have at the time. The day we decided to contact Candy, we had a sermon at church that Sunday. It was July of 2018. The message was in Acts, and I had a devotional Bible at that time, and when I opened it to my first page of Acts, the devotion for that month, or that book, was titled A Mother's Prayers. The very end of the devotion said, "Take heart, God hears your prayers for your children." Our preacher spoke on Acts that day, but I can't remember what he said. What I do remember was what he said at the last of his sermon. The church was in debt at that time at $100,000. The building needed some major repairs. I remember thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. But then Drew, our pastor, said, I opened our mailbox the other day, and out fell a card with a check for exactly $100,000.
How much?
I swear he looked at me right when he said it. He said, if you have doubts about your finances, God's got you. He sees you, and he always comes through. I couldn't wait to get to Luke, who was volunteering at the light board that Sunday. I was on board, and so was he, with the road to adoption with ABBA. Once we started the process, things went along smoothly. We were matched for a baby in October of that year. We were so excited. We met the birth parents, all the good stuff. A week before our due date, with the nursery ready for a baby girl, the birth mother changed her mind. Luke and I were devastated. It felt like our hopes and dreams had just evaporated with that decision. Here we had a nursery all ready to go, our hearts open and so excited, and the Lord just closed the door. That was hard to walk through. I struggled from the moment we got the call that it was dissolved. I kept the nursery door closed. I couldn't see the crib, the bedding, or the changing table. I wrestled it out with God for a while. He's obviously bigger than me and had his big boy pants on and could take all of the questions I threw at him. Still though, it was hard. ABBA was there to help us walk through that struggle. Candy was so helpful, reassuring us that things had changed, that it was his timing and not ours. Still, it's not what I wanted to hear. In the waiting time though, we prayed, we traveled, and we hoped. The next summer, our church was back in action again. I saw the same devotional, I read the same thing, God hears your prayers for your children. I wrote at that time, July 14th, 2019, I wrote Still Waiting. I remember doubting God at this point. Do you really hear me? Or are you so busy with someone else that you've just forgotten we have a nursery already here? The nursery door was still closed, the hurt was still there. We attended baby showers for friends that came and went. Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays, our hearts weren't in it. We still long for a baby. Have you forgotten us, Lord? In January of 2020, we decided to remodel our kitchen. In a kitchen remodel, you have to put all the junk in your kitchen somewhere in your house. Well, for us, that had to be the nursery. I remember really struggling that day able to even open the door. I had a blog back then, and I blogged about it. I wrote, I'm dried up from waiting, wanting, and longing that never seems far from my mind. I'm dried up of wishing and hoping that Luke and I will someday have kids to love. I tried my best to pray and listen for God's voice in this matter. Right now, he seems completely silent. Since October 2018, when we were matched and rejected, that hurt a whole bunch. I thought about David, the man after God's own heart. He knew that he was meant to be king, but it wasn't easy. David sinned, doubted, and spent many years running for his life. It wasn't an easy journey. I realized that sometimes I feel like David. I know God called us to do this whole adoption thing. I knew we did the right thing in following him, but the journey was not what I expected. I guess I thought this time would be easier. The Lord knows Luke and I had our challenges and heartaches before. Why not a little bit easier road for us? I even felt like that I had one shot at motherhood and blew it before. So therefore, why would God give us another tiny human to love? When I doubted all of that, I was still reminded that David did persevere. He did chase after God, and while it wasn't easy, it was what he was called to do. God saw his bigger picture, even though David could not. God was there with him, even when David didn't feel it. Therefore, I had to trust that God knew what he was doing and was doing the same for me. He was trustworthy, and he was and is bigger than anything I faced. What I did know was that God could be trusted even more when I had so much doubt. God was not my feelings. He is all-knowing and all-powerful, and that never changes. That was something I could put my trust in. So while trusting God that day, I filled the nursery with all of our kitchen junk. I prayed to God and reminded him yet again that I was there. We were still waiting. Did you forget us? I honestly still believed in him. I told him that day, but I also told him I was done with this adoption thing. Forget it, peace out, find somebody else. It was not for me anymore. I wrote that blog and hit publish. Little did I know what Candy and ABBA Adoption were doing in that moment. The moment I hit publish, laying it all out there with God, was the exact moment ABBA Adoption got the call from the hospital about a baby boy. Luke had just finished pulling on our stove. We had no sink. We had no kitchen. When the phone rang about 9:30 that night, it was Candy. I answered thinking nothing of it. She tells me, well, I have a baby boy at the hospital, and I'm like, that's great, fabulous, why are you calling me? And so I figured she probably didn't think it was clicking, so she had Luke get on the phone. I'll never forget his face. He hung up the phone and said, get dressed, we have our son to meet. I couldn't believe it. I also couldn't get dressed fast enough. We called everyone on the way to the hospital. When we got there, he was perfect and he was ours. God had finally answered our prayers. Just when I was done and had enough, he heard me and answered. It wasn't in my timing, but his. Jack Allen Williams was ours. We brought him home 3 days later to our cabinet people, literally putting in our countertops. It was just like God to surprise this girl. I'm an organizer, I'm a planner, I go by the book. And I didn't have one meal in the freezer. And we also didn't even have a kitchen. God blessed us with round 2, Rhett Andrew. We figured it would be another 2 or 3 years. You know, we'd sign up again and wait forever and it'd be a journey. We were matched within 3 months. The day he was born, I had a party in a house full of women when we got the call. I was yet again unprepared. The 2 boys are our biggest blessings. They are 18 months apart and our house is total chaos and craziness all the time. I can't look at the 2 of them, though, without thinking of their birth moms, the decision they made, the courage it took, and the heartache that came with that decision to help us become a forever family. ABBA Adoption takes time to know the birth moms. They aren't just another case number, they are real people. About a year ago, I contacted Candy because I felt like the Lord was leading me to help young women since I am, well, the older woman now. Well, who knows women better than Candy, so we talked it out. We started working the Breakheart Ministry. Through this ministry, we've helped young girls understand that God loves them no matter what, that they have a support system, and that they can do this thing called life no matter how impossible it seems. I've watched them come in with nothing to say at our first meetings, where I felt totally inadequate and probably talked way too much to fill in the dead silence. But God used that.